I walked into my boutique, humming to myself, ready to steam my daughter's graduation gown one last time. And then silence. My heart dropped. The ivory chiffon I'd poured 7 months of my life into lay shredded across the floor like someone had murdered a dream, pearls scattered under my feet. I didn't need to guess who did it. My mother-in-law's shadow had been hanging over us for years, finding new ways to break my daughter's spirit. But this time she crossed a line. She thought she'd ruined Lily's big day. She had no idea I'd been waiting for this moment. The bell above my boutique door had barely stopped jingling that morning when my entire world shifted. I walked into the back room, coffee in one hand, still humming a tune I didn't even remember starting. And then, I froze. The mannequin where Lily's graduation gown had been displayed for weeks now stood naked, surrounded by scraps of ivory chiffon and torn lace. The delicate silver-threaded pearls I'd sewn one by one were scattered across the floor like raindrops after a storm. I swear I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. My fingers trembled as I bent down to pick up a piece of the skirt, something I'd spent 7 months handcrafting, pouring every bit of love and pride I had into it. It wasn't just a dress. It was my gift to Lily, my 18-year-old daughter who'd fought tooth and nail to be where she was. The girl who had spent years dodging the cruel remarks and accidental sabotages from my mother-in-law, Maggie Turner. And that's when the anger hit, sharp and hot. Because I didn't need to play detective. Maggie had been in here yesterday, all fake smiles and a bag of old fabric she thought I'd like. Her eyes had been darting around my boutique like she was casing the place. This wasn't just another petty slight. This was family betrayal of the cruelest kind. Graduation was tomorrow. The clock was ticking, and she'd made sure Lily wouldn't have the dress she'd been dreaming about. I pulled out my phone and called Grace, my best friend and co-owner of the boutique. "She did it again," I said, my voice breaking. "The dress is ruined, Grace." There was silence on the other end, then a sharp inhale. "Emma, this is beyond cruel. This is calculated. This is one of those family revenge stories people think only happen in movies. What are you going to do?" I stared at the fabric in my hands and felt a shift inside me. She wants a fight? She's going to get one. But on my terms. Grace's voice dropped into that no-nonsense tone she used when she meant business. "Tell me you have a plan." And I did. Because after Maggie had destroyed Lily's art portfolio last year, a week before her biggest school showcase, I'd learned my lesson. I'd quietly started on another dress, something entirely different, hidden away in a garment bag behind a rack of outdated prom gowns. Emerald green satin that shimmered under the light, with beadwork that caught the eye from across the room. It was bold, it was powerful, and tomorrow, Maggie would have to watch Lily shine brighter than she ever imagined. This wasn't just a sewing project anymore. It was going to be the best revenge story I'd ever tell. I wish I could tell you this was the first time Maggie had crossed the line. But the truth? This was just the latest chapter in a long, ugly book I'd been forced to live through. When I first married Dan, I believed Maggie's coldness toward me was just adjustment. I was the new wife, stepping into the shadow of his late first wife. A woman Maggie practically canonized. But when Lily, my daughter from my first marriage, came into the picture, things turned darker. Maggie never raised her voice, never made a scene. No. She was far too clever for that. Instead, she specialized in quiet sabotage. She'd forget to tell Lily about art club meetings until they were over. She accidentally spilled coffee on a watercolor Lily had worked on for weeks. The worst was last year, 2 days before Lily's school art showcase, when an entire portfolio of her work was found covered in streaks of paint. Maggie swore she'd knocked it over by mistake. Dan believed her. I didn't. That's when I started keeping records. Dates, times, witnesses, even photographs when I could get them. Some people journal their gratitude. I was journaling my ammunition. If Maggie wanted to play the long game, so could I. And yet, through it all, Lily kept going. She worked harder, stayed later at the studio, built her portfolio from scratch more times than I could count. She was my inspirational story in the middle of all this madness, living proof of overcoming adversity. Grace had been my sounding board through every incident. "You're playing the long game, Em," she'd say. "One day, all of this will matter. People will see the truth." That day had come. Because here's the thing about family betrayal, it doesn't stay hidden forever. It rots from the inside, and sooner or later, the smell reaches everyone. Maggie thought she was invisible. She thought her halo was untouchable. I was done letting her write our story. When Lily got home from rehearsal that afternoon, her smile was wide, cheeks flushed with excitement. But the second her eyes landed on the shredded dress, her whole body seemed to shrink. "Mom, what happened?" I hated the way her voice cracked. I hated that Maggie's cruelty had stolen this moment from her. "It was Maggie," I said, quietly but firmly. "She's been trying to dim your light for years. But sweetheart, she's not going to win." I pulled the garment bag from behind the curtain. Slowly, I unzipped it, letting the emerald gown catch the soft shop light. Beads shimmered like tiny stars across the fabric. Lily gasped. "You made this? For me?" "Because you deserve to shine," I said, "no matter what anyone tries to take from you." Her eyes burned with the same fire I felt in my chest. This wasn't just about a dress anymore. This was about reclaiming every moment Maggie had stolen. And tomorrow, we'd do it in front of the whole town. The morning of Lily's graduation was one of those perfect Ohio days, crisp air, endless blue sky, sunlight spilling through the curtains. I woke early, more out of restless anticipation than any alarm. Lily sat in front of her vanity while I curled her hair, each glossy strand falling in soft waves. The emerald gown hung on the closet door, its beadwork catching the morning light like a promise. Dan walked in mid-moment, his eyes immediately locking on the dress. "That's not the one you showed me last week." I didn't stop pinning Lily's curl. "No, it's not. You should ask your mother about that." His brow furrowed. "Emma, you can't mean—" I turned just enough to meet his gaze in the mirror. The pieces of the original gown are still in my workroom. 7 months of work, gone in minutes. Lily's voice was steady when she added, "Dad, it's not the first time. Remember my art portfolio? Or when someone canceled my art show entry, pretending to be Mom?" Dan's shoulders slumped. For years, he'd brushed off Maggie's behavior as harmless quirks. Now, he looked like a man starting to see the rot in his own foundation. We arrived early to the school. Families filled the parking lot in their Sunday best, the air buzzing with chatter. Lily stepped out of the car, the emerald satin flowing around her like liquid light. Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. That's when I saw Maggie. Standing near the entrance, lips pressed tight, her husband Bob beside her. The moment her eyes landed on Lily, her expression twisted shock first, then a flush of rage. "What is she wearing?" she hissed at Dan, gripping his arm. I smiled just enough for the nearby parents to hear me clearly. "Not the dress you saw, Maggie. Someone destroyed that one yesterday. Good thing I always have a backup." Her face went crimson. Bob glanced at her, confused, but she didn't answer. Inside the auditorium, Lily joined the other valedictorian speakers. From where I sat, I could see Maggie fidgeting 2 rows away, glancing between Lily and me like she was calculating her next move. Grace leaned over and whispered, "Emma, this is one of those family revenge stories people won't stop talking about for years." I smiled. "It's more than that. It's a life lesson she'll never forget." 1. The lights dimmed, the ceremony began, and Lily was moments away from her turn on stage. My heart pounded not from nerves, but from pride. Because this wasn't just Lily's day anymore. This was our quiet revenge story. Our proof that overcoming adversity can be as beautiful as the victory itself. And Maggie? She was about to get a front row seat to it all. The principal's voice echoed through the auditorium, announcing Lily Collins as one of the valedictorian speakers. My breath caught as my daughter stepped onto the stage, emerald gown glowing under the spotlights like it had been born for this moment. She adjusted the microphone, scanned the crowd, and just for a second locked eyes with me. Then she began. "Life isn't always about the people who lift you up," she said, her voice calm but laced with power. "Sometimes, it's about the ones who try to hold you down. And sometimes, those people are the ones you least expect." The room went silent. Maggie stiffened in her seat, her hands gripping her program so tightly the paper crumpled. Parents glanced at her, whispers sparking like wildfire. "But strength," Lily continued, "isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up every single time. When people try to dim your light, you find a way to shine brighter. And you realize their darkness was never your responsibility to fix." I swear I saw Maggie flinch. This wasn't just a graduation speech. This was a public reckoning wrapped in grace, but sharp enough to draw blood. And it was one of those true stories that would be retold for years, the kind of best revenge story that feels almost too poetic to be real. From my seat, I could see Dan wiping his eyes. I'd waited years for him to truly see what Lily had endured. And in that moment, I think he finally did. The applause at the end was thunderous. Lily stepped down, shoulders back, her chin high. She didn't just speak, she owned that stage. When the ceremony ended, the lobby became a swirl of hugs, photos, and flowers. Maggie approached, her tight smile stretched thin. "Lovely speech," she said, her tone dripping with the effort of pretending. I didn't waste time. From my purse, I pulled out my small leather journal and flipped it open. March 2 years ago, paint spilled on Lily's art portfolio. June last year, you called the school, pretending to be me, to cancel her art show entry. Should I keep going? Dan's eyes widened as he read over my shoulder. "Mom, is this true?" Maggie's lips parted, but no sound came. Bob stepped closer, his expression darkening. "Maggie, did you also tell Lily's art teacher she was unreliable? To keep her out of the showcase?" Silence. "Give me your key," Dan said, his voice steady but cold. "You're not welcome in our home until you make this right." Maggie's cheeks flushed red. She looked around, realizing half the graduating class's parents were watching. This was more than just an argument, this was exposure. And in that moment, she knew her halo had cracked. For me, this was the turning point, the shift where family betrayal finally met consequences. And I wasn't done yet. The ride home from the graduation felt different. Not celebratory, not tense, just quiet. Dan's hands stayed glued to the steering wheel, his jaw tight, eyes fixed on the road. Lily sat in the back, still in her emerald gown, holding her bouquet of flowers like it was a shield. When we pulled into the driveway, Dan didn't get out right away. He just sat there, staring straight ahead. Finally, he said, "Emma, I'm sorry." His voice cracked, low and raw. "I should have believed you years ago." I didn't speak right away. There was too much history between us, too many times I'd bitten my tongue to keep the peace, too many nights I'd comforted Lily while he insisted Maggie meant well. Lily leaned forward from the back seat. "Dad, you see it now. That's what matters." Her tone was gentle, but her eyes, they held a strength I hadn't seen before. That night, we sat around the kitchen table, the three of us, while Maggie's absence echoed in the empty chair she used to occupy at family dinners. It was strange, quiet, yes, but also peaceful. The phone rang. Bob. His voice was heavy, and not just from age. "Emma, Dan, I found something." He told us about the attic, about the box. Inside were Lily's missing ribbons, art supplies, sketches, things we thought had been lost or accidentally damaged over the years. Maggie had kept them, like trophies. Lily's face went pale. "She kept them? Why?" Dan's hand tightened around hers. "Because hurting you was never an accident, Lil. It was a hobby." Bob's voice broke. "I'm speaking to a lawyer. I can't be married to someone who takes pride in cruelty." When he hung up, the three of us just sat there, stunned. The weight of years of family betrayal pressed down on the room, but so did something else relief. Because now, finally, the truth wasn't just ours to carry. Grace came by later with a bottle of sparkling cider and a grin. "Well," she said, "if this isn't the most satisfying revenge story I've ever seen play out in real life, I don't know what is." Lily laughed for the first time that day, the sound light and unburdened. "I guess it is kind of a life lesson, isn't it? That some people will never change, so you have to change how much space they get in your life." Dan looked at her, really looked at her, and said, "You're my daughter. Always have been. And I won't let anyone, family or not, treat you like less ever again." It was one of those true stories that didn't end with a big explosion, but with quiet clarity. We weren't just surviving Maggie anymore, we were free from her. 2 days after graduation, Maggie made her move. Or at least she tried. A long post appeared on her social media, dripping with self-pity. She wrote about being misunderstood, about family tensions, carefully framing herself as the victim of false accusations. Miker. I almost laughed. Almost. Because what she didn't realize was that the people she was trying to sway had already been at the graduation. They'd seen Lily's speech. They'd seen Maggie's face. And small towns? They talk faster than the internet. By noon, Grace called. "Have you seen the comments on her post? Emma, they're not buying it." I pulled up the page. Sure enough, the replies were brutal. Former friends, neighbors, even her church acquaintances were chiming in, reminding her of things she'd said, little digs they'd witnessed over the years, stories I hadn't even heard. It was like the whole town had been quietly keeping their own records. And then Bob's sweet, steady Bob posted his own statement. Calm, factual, devastating. He confirmed the attic box. He listed the items. He wrote that he was seeking a divorce because he could not stay married to someone who had taken deliberate joy in hurting her own family. It was the final crack in Maggie's halo. By the next morning, she had stepped down from her volunteer positions at the library and church. Her community reputation was gone, replaced by a shadow of whispers every time she walked into a store. Lily saw the updates while sipping her morning coffee. "Think she's actually sorry?" she asked, one eyebrow raised. I shook my head. "Not a chance. But she knows we have enough proof to ruin her completely if she tries anything again." Because we did. The journal, the photographs, the security footage from the boutique, every piece of her sabotage cataloged and safe. This wasn't just some petty feud. This was the end of a pattern. And honestly, watching her world shrink down to the size of her own bitterness was more satisfying than any screaming match could have been. Grace dropped by that afternoon, grinning. "You know, Emma, this could be one of those best revenge stories people share for years. The way you played the long game, kept your proof. It's like a masterclass in overcoming adversity." Lily laughed. "More like a masterclass in patience. Mom could have gone nuclear a long time ago." I smiled, sipping my tea. Sometimes the best revenge story isn't about tearing someone down, it's about standing so strong they can't reach you anymore. And Maggie? She'd never reach us again. The emerald gown still hung in Lily's closet a week later, its beadwork catching the sunlight that streamed through her bedroom window. I'd walked past it every morning, and every time, it reminded me of more than just that day. It reminded me of the moment we took our power back. Life felt lighter without Maggie's shadow looming over us. Meals at home were quieter, but in the best way, no backhanded comments, no awkward silences after one of her jokes. Just laughter, conversation, and the occasional bickering over whose turn it was to do the dishes. Dan had changed, too. He no longer made excuses for his mother, and for the first time, he started actively defending Lily without hesitation. One evening over dinner, he said, "I don't know why I couldn't see it before, but I'll spend the rest of my life making sure neither of you ever feel like outsiders again." Lily just smiled and squeezed his hand. That simple gesture said everything. Bob called a few days later to tell us the divorce paperwork was moving forward. His voice carried the weight of someone who'd finally dropped a boulder they'd been carrying for decades. She's still trying to paint herself as the victim, he admitted. But Emma, no one's buying it anymore. R. It hit me then, this was more than just a win for us. This was the collapse of the story Maggie had been telling about herself for years. The perfect grandmother, the selfless matriarch, gone. Grace came over with takeout and milkshakes to celebrate. She leaned back in her chair, smirking. You know, this is one of those true stories that's going to become local legend. A textbook family betrayal flipped into the best revenge story anyone's heard in this town. Lily laughed. And all we had to do was live our lives? Exactly, I said. That's the real-life lesson when someone spends years trying to tear you down. The most powerful thing you can do is refuse to break. We clinked our milkshake glasses together like champagne flutes. No victory parade, no fireworks, just peace. And honestly, it felt better than any dramatic ending I could have scripted. Because the thing about a good revenge story is that the win isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet freedom of knowing they can't touch you anymore. And in that quiet, we thrived. Looking back now, I realize Maggie never truly had power over us. She only had the power we allowed her to take. For years, I thought keeping the peace meant staying silent, but silence only fed her cruelty. The moment we stopped protecting her image and started protecting ourselves, everything changed. Lily walked across that graduation stage not just as a top student, but as living proof that no amount of sabotage can dim a determined heart. This wasn't just one of those family revenge stories you hear over coffee. It was a true story about overcoming adversity, about turning family betrayal into strength, and proving that love outlasts spite every single time. We didn't just win against Maggie, we built something stronger in the process. Trust, unity, freedom, and that's a victory no one can take away. So here's my question for you. What would you do if someone in your own family tried to tear you down for years? Would you fight back loudly, or would you play the long game like we did? Tell me your thoughts, because every scar has a story, and sometimes those stories can change someone else's life.